Our planet faces an unprecedented health, social, and economic crisis, one that puts every nation on Earth in danger and challenges all fundamental assumptions about our world. The COVID-19 pandemic threatens to reverse decades of development progress, putting the Sustainable Development Goals at risk. It has brutally exposed the vulnerability of developing countries and magnified the inequality that exists both within and between nations. This is the first opportunity since the pandemic began for world leaders to come together and create global solutions for trade and development. The almost 200 countries represented here have a unique opportunity to do things differently, to do things better, to make sure global trade benefits everybody equally. This is our opportunity to forge a shared destiny between developing countries and developed ones, to use technology to create better productive systems, to cut carbon emissions and give our planet another chance, to put in place effective financing for development and establish a sustainable global debt system. We have the potential to give everybody the opportunity to succeed by bridging the digital divide, improving gender equality, boosting productive capacities, and investing in our youth. UNCTAD 15 is a moment for us all to act together, to employ bold new thinking to help address the biggest challenges that face the world. Together, let's create a more equitable and prosperous future for everyone. Together, let's move from inequality and vulnerability to a future of prosperity for all. Because now, more than ever before, trade needs to work for everybody.
A very good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. If I could just implore the room to sit down. We're live now, actually, so we have officially started. Your Excellencies, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us for this closing plenary session of the 15th Quadrennial Conference of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. My name is Peter Rockwatcher. I'm a senior broadcast journalist with the BBC in London. I've been at the conference since day one, and I must say it's been quite a learning experience. There have been so many intelligent voices at this conference over the course of the last 4 days. We've had over 5,000 people, 5,300 or thereabouts, watching every single day. So it's been a huge success. We've had heads of states from at least 8 different countries with us during our World Leaders Dialogues 1, 2, and 3. We've also had the heads of some of the UN's most important organizations join us and give us their thoughts on the topics that we've had here today, over the past week or so. I have one takeaway from it, and it's going to follow me for a very long time, and I hope that a lot of you who are here today will also use that as a mantra, because you are the ones that the world is looking up to influence not only ordinary people like myself, but world leaders across this globe of ours. And that mantra for me is that climate change and the coronavirus pandemic are global challenges that need global solutions. It is not a one state do it for everybody. Everybody must put their hands on deck. So that's my takeaway, just as a journalist, and I hope it does make sense that that is what I'm going to be going away with. It's now my pleasure to name or to introduce our podium to you today. It's a very important podium. And they've also been with us over the course of the past week. First of all, Barbados, which is hosting this conference, is also very well represented here at the Palais des Nations in Geneva, in the person of Ms. Sandra Husbands, who is a minister in the Ministry of Foreign Trade in Barbados. Thanks for joining us, Madam Minister. Thank you very much. I'd also like to welcome back the Secretary General of UNCTAD, who's just had, I'm not even sure how long that flight is, but I know she's just practically arrived in Geneva from Barbados, and she's joining us here today. Ms. Rebeca Grynspan, thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you're not too tired and not too jet-lagged. I'm sure she is. I'd also like to introduce the secretary of this conference, Senor Miguel Bautista. Thanks for being with us all through. And the chair of the committee for this conference, Her Excellency Maimuna Kibenga Tarishi of Tanzania. Jambo, Your Excellency. Thank you very much. And by the way, congratulations to her, because Tanzanian author has just won the Nobel Prize for Literature. So, you know, a great day for you. And lastly, but in nowhere least, I'd like to introduce the rapporteur in the person of Ms. Yana Brugier. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, as I did mention, Barbados is the host of this conference. We're just holding fort for them at the Palais des Nations. I'd also like to welcome now our chief host for this conference, in the person of the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Amor Motley. Over to you, Prime Minister Motley.
Thank you very much, Peter, and let me thank you for an excellent job this week. Both you and Sharon have really brought a special tone to these meetings, and it is truly our pleasure to have had you guide us over the course of the last 4 days. So thank you. I want to hereby open the plenary meeting of UNCTAD 15. And as I said, this has been an interesting week. I think it has come off far better than all of us had anticipated, and I want to thank everyone. I'll do it further down again. But as we open up, I want to thank those of you who are joining us and listening, whether in Barbados, Geneva, or wherever on this planet you are. Let us take up first item 5B, report of the Credentials Committee. And I would like to now invite the chair of the Credentials Committee, Mr. Loffendal of Sweden, to present his report. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Credentials Committee, I have the honor to introduce the report of the Credentials Committee concerning the credentials of the representatives to the 15th session of the conference. I wish to inform the conference that the Credentials Committee held 2 meetings on the 4th and the 6th of October 2021. Having considered the credentials of the representatives to the 15th session of the conference at its meeting on the 6th of October 2021, the Credentials Committee decided, on the basis of consensus, to accept those credentials. The committee considered 2 communications concerning representatives of Myanmar to the conference and decided not to take any action on those credentials pending the guidance from the Credentials Committee of the United Nations General Assembly. Finally, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the members of the committee and to the Secretariat for facilitating our work. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. And may I propose to the conference that we approve the report of the Credentials Committee? As there are no objections, it is so decided. Let us, my friends, now continue with the political declaration for UNCTAD 15. It is with absolute pleasure that I give the floor now to our Minister, the Honorable Sandra Husbands in Geneva, to introduce the political declaration known as the Spirit of Speightstown. Minister Husbands, the floor is yours, my dear.
Thank you, Madam President. The Honourable Mia Amor Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, Honourable Ministers, Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, I am indeed honoured, on behalf of the Presidency of the Conference, to introduce the Spirit of Speightstown, the political declaration of UNCTAD 15. Madam President, the Spirit of Speightstown seeks to capture the main challenges impacting our family of nations and their development aspirations, but particularly those amongst us that are most vulnerable. Building on the theme from inequality and vulnerability to prosperity for all, the Spirit of Speightstown declares our vision for achieving the transformations necessary to build resilience and to achieve our coveted sustainable development agenda. The Spirit of Speightstown is set in the context of a world facing unprecedented and overlapping challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate crisis. These dual phenomena threaten to halt or reverse the progress achieved since our last conference in pursuit of 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, and has exposed the fact that as global citizens, we are all vulnerable. Indeed, the political declaration acknowledges that the combined effects of the pandemic and the climate crisis presents a crisis of the global common good. In that regard, the Spirit of Speightstown calls for a revitalized covenant for development. It calls for understanding, compromise, and cooperation at all levels. It challenges all of us to work across faith, cultures, and nationalities to arrive at a shared vision for our interconnected world in order to ensure that we are all able to achieve a better future for our children and generations to come. In doing so, we must address growing inequality and vulnerability. It calls for a revitalized multilateral spirit based on political will, the provision of means of implementation, and strengthened coordinated approach to address the vulnerabilities and weaknesses hindering the transformation required to reverse growing inequality and to build resilience, particularly among the most vulnerable. Cooperation and not unilateralism is needed now more than ever to address the challenges that confront us. We need to ensure that our multilateral institutions are fit for purpose and that we have policies and instruments that give due attention to those that are most vulnerable, our women, children, the disabled, indigenous people, migrants, refugees, internally displaced persons, the homeless, and other marginalized groups. Madam President, addressing vulnerabilities also mean that we must be conscious of our approach to development, which must take account of the vulnerabilities of developing countries, particularly small island developing states, who are on the front line of the climate crisis and whose assets are devastated by natural disasters. These countries tend to have the highest debt to GDP ratios as a result of circumstances that are not of their own making. The Spirit of Speightstown calls for improved decision-making and participation in all of our institutions, as well as calls for improved cooperation. We need to look at the issue of tax matters, and we need to view this to ensure that we are able to meaningfully finance our development. Addressing the digital divide is key to reducing inequality and improving opportunities for all, particularly the most vulnerable and for those who do not have access to the required infrastructure, technology, and skill sets to meaningfully take advantage of the growing digital economy. Finally, the spirit of Speightstown acknowledges the role that Unktad must play in realizing prosperity for all, which must be anchored in the transformation set out in the Bridgestone Covenant. In our view, Unktad has a major role to play in fostering the required intergovernmental action necessary to generate the momentum towards a more resilient, sustainable, and prosperous world. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for those very strong remarks. And I'd like to thank you, Minister Husbands, for the excellent work that has been accomplished, as well, of course, as Carlos Wharton and others with you there, who participated along with the Bureau members of the conference and all of the other delegations right to the very end to ensure that we could finalize this declaration. Therefore, my friends, it is with great pride that I now invite this conference to adopt the spirit of Speightstown. If there are no objections, let it be so decided. Thank you. Let us now turn to the report of the Committee of the Whole. I'd like now to invite the Chair of the Committee of the Whole, Her Excellency Ambassador Maimuna Kebenga Tarishi, to inform the conference of the result of the negotiations. Ambassador Tarishi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I have the honor and the pleasure to report that at its closing plenary yesterday, the 6th of October 2021, the Committee of the Whole reached consensus on the Bridgestone Covenant, and it transmitted the text to the plenary of the conference with a recommendation for the text to be formally adopted. I therefore transmit to you, Madam President, the Bridgestone Covenant and recommend its adoption at this closing plenary meeting of UNCTAD 15. The journey was long and at times difficult, but the negotiators maintained an excellent spirit, and the fruits of their constructive engagement are clear for all to see. Indeed, with their positive spirit and diplomatic skills, we reached the opening of the conference with an unprecedented proportion of the negotiating text already agreed. I hope that this spirit will be maintained and weighted by the spirit of our Bridgestone Covenant, and that at the next time we will reach the conference with a clean text. Before I yield the floor, Madam President, I wish to thank the friends of the chair, namely Ambassadors Salim Badura of Lebanon, Michael Gaffey of Ireland, Alfreda Suskam of Panama, and Federico Villegas of Argentina for their wisdom and steadfast support. My thanks also go to the group coordinators for demonstrating the finest diplomacy at the greatest heights. I also wish to thank the Secretary General of UNCTAD, Madam Rebeca Grynspan, and the Deputy Secretary General, Madam Isabella Duran, for their support, as well as the assistance extended by the UNCTAD Secretariat, especially Mr. Miguel Bautista, the Secretary of the Board, as well as Mr. Joan Martinez Badillo, the Group Liaison Officer, and the entire Intergovernmental Support Unity team. I also wish to thank substantive experts who helped us navigate the difficult technical waters, namely Mr. Carlos Razo and Ms. Dong Wu, and all UNCTAD division focal points who were always ready to support the member states to provide clarifications during UNCTAD 15 negotiations. I thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Tarishi, and I realize your work has not been easy, given the very complex issues, but as you just said, the reality is that the spirit of cooperation predominated in spite of the difficult conditions due to the pandemic and due to the delays that we had. I admire your perseverance and patience, truly, because it is not easy. My thanks also go out to the facilitators and the regional coordinators to whom you referred. At this point, it is my pleasure to invite the conference to adopt the Bridgestone Covenant. If there are no objections, let us now so do. The Bridgestone Covenant is now formally adopted by UNCTAD 15 conference. Before we move on, I'd like to give the floor to His Excellency Ambassador Esmail Bagai Khamenei of Iran, who I believe is in Geneva. Excellency, you have the floor.
Madam President, Excellency, Honorable Prime Minister of Barbados, distinguished delegates. The delegation of the Islamic Republic of Iran would like to congratulate Barbados for successful hosting of UNCTAD 15. We thank the UNCTAD 15's Bureau and indeed all who contributed to this important outcome. Madam President, I would like to put on record the following observation in connection with paragraph 99 and 127G that relate to the need for the UNCTAD to better address the consequences of unilateral coercive measures on development and on the well-being of the targeted countries. The growing scope, type, target, and frequency of unilateral coercive measures require the international community to be seriously alarmed over the illegality of such measures under international law, as well as the disastrous economic and social consequences of these measures on the affected populations. Madam President, UNCTAD was established to accord developing nations a louder voice in matters of international economic governance in support of their people's right to self-determination. The UNCTAD's chief assignment is to ensure that development remains a top priority and that trade benefits all. The mutually reinforcing nexus between trade and development is key to promoting prosperity for all, reducing inequality within and among states, and lessening vulnerability across the globe. The international community cannot afford to remain unfazed at the challenges that are undermining lawful trade relations and thus compromising development. The right to development is at risk of unprecedented threats and distresses, principally coming from unilateral economic, trade, and financial measures disguised under different pseudo-legal excuses. Development needs to be sustained by an enabling environment where the rule of law prevails and where fair, inclusive, and non-discriminatory trade relations that provides for access to technology, finance, and capacity building could thrive. However, the frequent and widespread resort to unilateral coercive measures have severely affected both trade and development. Weaponization of currency and instrumentalization of economic power to effect desired political change in developing states have contaminated international trade and repressed development. Unilateral economic and financial sanctions, as inhuman and unjust as they are not only endangering the fundamental principles of free and fair trade, but also undermine the basic tenets of international law by normalizing the extraterritorial application of domestic law at the cost of lawful sovereign rights and privileges of other states. Madam President, unilateral measures also infringe on the sovereign right of affected countries to access to their foreign assets to procure food, medicine, and other essential commodities. This is all the more consequential during the COVID-19 crisis, when targeted countries are obstructed from accessing adequate supplies of COVID treatment, test, vaccine, and medical equipment. Unilateral coercive measures have also adversely affected the capacity of major refugee host countries to protect these vulnerable people on the move and also undermine humanitarian space. It is very telling, Madam President, that the overwhelming majority, or almost all, of unilateral coercive measures that target entire populations are applied against developing countries and economies in transition. The rapidly expanding use of unilateral coercive trade and financial measures against developing states and the ensuing economic, social, and human suffering consequences that suffered by the affected people need to be taken more seriously than before. Madam President, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development is expected to utilize its 3 pillars of research and analysis, intergovernmental consensus building, and technical cooperation to address the negative implications of financial and trade unilateral coercive measures on development and on basic economic, social, and other human rights of the targeted populations. I thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I'd like now to note that this issue and explanation will be reflected in the report of the conference, but I'd also like to invite now from Cuba, Ambassador Quintanilla, to take the floor, please.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Ante todo, permítame felicitar a Barbados por la excelente organización de esta conferencia ministerial. Nuestra solidaridad y hermandad con este hermano pueblo. Señora presidenta, uno de los temas más relevantes del documento que hemos acordado es, sin dudas, las medidas coercitivas unilaterales, dado su impacto negativo en el comercio y el desarrollo, no solo de los países víctimas de esas medidas, sino también de muchos otros. Cuba conoce esa realidad muy bien, pues ha sido y continúa siendo víctima del bloqueo económico, comercial y financiero impuesto por el gobierno de los Estados Unidos durante 6 décadas. El bloqueo es el sistema de sanciones coercitivas unilaterales más severo y prolongado que se ha aplicado contra país alguno. Constituye una violación flagrante de los derechos del pueblo cubano y el obstáculo principal a nuestro desarrollo económico y social. Es una violación flagrante del derecho internacional y de la Carta de la ONU. El bloqueo afecta todos los sectores de la vida del país. A precios corrientes, los daños acumulados en casi 6 décadas de aplicación de esta política ascienden a más de 147.853 millones de dólares. La administración del expresidente Trump recrudeció el bloqueo contra Cuba hasta niveles sin precedentes, con 243 medidas de guerra económica, incluyendo en el contexto de la pandemia de la COVID-19, a la cual identificó como aliada en su política de hostilidad hacia nuestro país. Con la actual administración estadounidense, la situación se mantiene igual. Señora presidenta, agradecemos todos los esfuerzos realizados por los facilitadores y los amigos de la presidenta de la Junta de Comercio y Desarrollo para encontrar soluciones de avenencia en este tema. Sin embargo, lo acordado no es suficiente. No refleja la realidad de un mundo en el que prolifera la aplicación de ilegales, inmorales e inhumanas medidas coercitivas. Lamentamos y rechazamos que algunos grupos de países no comprendan la importancia y seriedad de esta cuestión. Solicitamos a la UNCTAD que brinde la atención que este asunto merece, el cual, sin lugar a dudas, es parte de su mandato. En ese empeño cuentan con todo el apoyo de Cuba. Solicito, señora presidenta, que esta declaración quede reflejada en actas y nuevamente felicitamos a Barbados y a la Secretaría por la organización de la conferencia. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, my brother. Let the note also reflect that the explanation given shall be reflected in the record and report of the conference. Let us move now to agenda item 9, other business. Prior to the staging of UNCTAD 15, there were a series of ministerial meetings and fora which resulted in declarations. I would like now to invite the coordinator of the Group of 77 and China, His Excellency Ambassador Nasir Andisha of Afghanistan, to present the group's ministerial declaration. Ambassador, you have the floor, sir.
Honorable Prime Minister Mia Mottley, Excellencies, good afternoon. Let me convey a message of apology from His Excellency Ambassador Andisha, the chair of Group of 77 and China, who could not deliver this statement on the conclusion of the G77 and China ministerial meeting, as he is in the Human Rights Council for consideration of a related agenda on my country. He will join us shortly. I am delivering the following statement on his behalf. President of the 15th session of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, Honorable Prime Minister Mia Mottley, Secretary General of UNCTAD, Ms. Rebeca Grynspan, distinguished dignitaries, excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Group of 77 and China to present the Bridgestone Declaration that our group adopted at our ministerial meeting held on Friday, 1st October 2021. Ministerial meetings of the Group of 77 and China on the occasion of UNCTAD conferences are the only regular minister-level meetings of the group, with the exception of the meetings of the foreign ministers held at the margin of the General Assembly every year. UNCTAD conferences indeed have a special significance for our group due to the link that unites UNCTAD and the Group of 77 since their common origin at UNCTAD 1. Madam President, we had a very productive ministerial meeting of our group on Friday, 1st October, which built on the work of the senior officials meeting of the group earlier that day and on the work of all delegations in Geneva over the previous months. I would thus like to take the opportunity to thank all members of our group for their hard work, flexibility, and commitment, in particular during my tenure as chair of the group in Geneva. I would like to also express our appreciation to our able chair of the 15th ministerial meeting, Minister Sandra Husbands of Barbados, acting in Barbados' capacity as vice chair of the Group of 77 and China in Geneva. She conducted the meeting in a very able manner and led us through a high-level discussion and to the adoption of the Bridgestone Ministerial Declaration of the Group of 77 and China. The 15th ministerial meeting of our group enjoyed the true ownership of the Global South, counting on the virtual presence of the G77 chair, Ambassador Deone from New York, as well as the chairs of the Paris, Nairobi, and Rome chapters, whom we also thank for their support and engagement. Then, during the general debate, we had a very high level of participation, including with 5 representatives of regional groups within the G77 and China, 4 of which at ministerial level, further 8 ministers and 5 vice ministers speaking in a national capacity, as well as over a dozen permanent representatives whose statements will be captured in the report of the meeting. Our meeting concluded with the adoption of the Bridgestone Ministerial Declaration, which, among others, underscored that much has been accomplished since the twin birth of UNCTAD and the Group of 77, particularly towards sustainable development in its economic, social, and environmental dimensions. Yet, our group highlighted how inequality and vulnerability continue to plague much of humanity, thus rendering the UNCTAD contribution more relevant than ever. Our group further reiterated that this is not the first time that we have called for concerted action to confront the existential threats to humanity. Yet, the COVID-19 pandemic, unequal access to vaccines, unilateralism, foreign occupation, recent natural disasters, maritime and industrial accidents, human displacement, weak productive capacities, lack of structural transformation, slow pace of diversification of economies, and food insecurity underscore the very real consequence of inaction. The declaration then goes on to consider various elements linked to the theme of the conference, particularly following 4 main areas: structural transformation and productive capacities, transforming multilateralism, transforming how development is financed, and transforming to a more sustainable economy. Madam President, our group reaffirmed that at Nairobi, we strove to move from decisions to action, while making it clear that the world we face today requires us to do better and move from actions to concrete results. In this connection, we recall that since UNCTAD 14, fundamental development challenges remain and are exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. These challenges include, but are not limited to, inequality, vulnerability, the effects of climate change, unilateral coercive measures, biodiversity loss, natural and man-made disasters, the escalating debt crisis, lack of competitiveness, commodity dependence, unsustainable patterns of consumption and production, less diversified production base, unemployment, food insecurity, shortages of basic services and infrastructure, illicit financial flows and activities that underlie their occurrence, as well as health-related shocks which impact on trade, impede the development and livelihood of nations and individuals, and violate their right to development. Our group also took the opportunity to look internally and take a stock, adopting a number of recommendations for better functioning of the Group of 77 and China, looking at our collaboration with partners entities, most importantly the UNCTAD Secretariat, and among the chapters of the Group of 77 and China, particularly as we took towards the 16th anniversary of UNCTAD and of the Group of 77 and China. One of the important elements of such a way forward is the need to not only build consensus, but also set a development narrative on issues affecting global trade and the global economy. Our group therefore looks forward to continuing to strengthen the negotiating function of UNCTAD intergovernmental machinery, especially the Trade and Development Board, and for these outcomes to make a meaningful and direct contribution to the broader work of the United Nations on development. The Group of 77 and China would therefore like to take the opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to a stronger UNCTAD and to work with our partners in helping take our world from inequality and vulnerability to prosperity for all. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Representative of Ambassador Andisha, sorry. May I invite the conference now to take note of the Bridgestone Ministerial Declaration of the Group of 77 and China. If there are no objections, let it be so decided. I'd now like to invite the coordinator of the Small Island Developing States, our very own His Excellency Ambassador Chad Blackman of Barbados, to present the group's Ministerial Declaration. Ambassador, over to you, sir.
The Honorable Mia Moore-Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados and President of the 15th session of UNCTAD, Secretary General of UNCTAD, Rebeca Grynspan, Deputy Secretary General of UNCTAD, Ms. Isabel Jerome, Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is a distinct honor for me to present the Ministerial Declaration of the Group of Small Island Developing States to the 15th session of the United Nations Conference on behalf of the group. This is indeed a momentous occasion, as the declaration before us today is the first that will be made on behalf of SIDS within the framework of an UNCTAD quadrennial conference. The SIDS Ministerial Declaration follows on from the declaration which was issued by the heads of government and state of the Alliance of Small Island Developing States, AOSIS, on the 22nd of September on the margins of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. In that declaration, AOSIS leaders call on UNCTAD to continue to provide support to SIDS and also requested that the group's ministers advance the interests of SIDS at UNCTAD 15. The declaration highlights key trade and development issues of specific concern to our countries. A number of these issues are not new and therefore require urgent action at the international level if SIDS are to reach their sustainable development objectives. The unique and peculiar vulnerabilities of SIDS to exogenous shocks owing to their size, geographical remoteness, the small scale of their economies, high dependence on external markets, and extreme exposure to natural disasters and the effects of the climate crisis have been a limiting factor which impedes our ability to build the requisite resilience. Madam President, the crises emanating from the COVID-19 pandemic have had and continues to have a disproportionate impact on SIDS, and I repeat, a disproportionate impact on SIDS, including the far-reaching and potentially enduring consequences for poverty eradication, employment, tourism, economic growth, debt burdens, empowerment of women and girls, youth development, education, and social welfare, as well as further deterioration in this context of the ability of SIDS to face external shocks. If SIDS are to recover from these, as well as the climate crisis, it will require greater access to international cooperation. This emphasis and also the need for the international financial institutions and other development partners of SIDS to move beyond a sole reliance on inadequate criteria, such as the GDP, GNI per capita, to determine eligibility for concessional financing. It also reinforces the need to continue work on vulnerability indices with a view to ensuring that SIDS can access the support required to recover from and build resilience to external shocks. Additionally, multilateral development banks and international financial institutions must adopt a more progressive approach that provides expanded debt relief to SIDS through the existing and new financial instruments. The SIDS group has called on Unctad to strengthen its technical support to the efforts of SIDS to address infrastructural gaps and to build more diversified, sustainable, and resilient economies. The SIDS group remains committed to Unctad and to working with its secretariat to roll out the work program set out in the Bridgestone Covenant. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Blackman, for your presentation. May I invite the conference to take note of the Ministerial Declaration of the Small Island Developing States, historic as it is in this conference. If there are no objections, let it be so decided. During the general debate on the 5th of October, the representative for the least developed countries, His Excellency Sostin Gwengwe, Minister of Trade of Malawi, presented a ministerial declaration on behalf of the group. May I invite the conference to take note of the ministerial declaration of the LDCs. If there are no objections, it is so decided. During the general debate also on the 5th of October, the representative of the landlocked developed countries, Her Excellency Ms. Batung Barsetke, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mongolia, presented a ministerial declaration on behalf of the group. May I now invite the conference to take note of the ministerial declaration of the landlocked developed countries. If there are no objections, let it also be so decided. I would now like to invite the representative of the civil society organizations, Ms. Sandra Messiah, Public Services International, to present the CSO's declaration. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon. Distinguished President of UNCTAD 15, Distinguished Secretary General, Distinguished Deputy Secretary General, distinguished delegates and guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased and honored on behalf of the International Civil Society Facilitation Group to present a summary of the Civil Society Declaration for UNCTAD 15. Our declaration emerged from the deliberations at the CSO Forum and contributes to our collected efforts to build forward better. The role and mandate of UNCTAD are central to our vision, our priorities, our activism. We therefore look forward to working closely with the newly appointed Secretary General to strengthen our working relations and ensure a meaningful and participatory pathway to the midterm review and the next UNCTAD Quadrennial Conference. The multiple crises before us magnify the depth of inequalities within and between countries, between men and women, and the consequences of decades of imperialism and neocolonialism, particularly through deregulation, liberalization, financialization, and corporate concentration. It is now urgent, very urgent, that we redirect resources to strengthen public services and social protection systems and reverse the decades-long pursuit of fiscal austerity, privatization, and public-private partnerships. There's an urgent necessity to democratically establish a new global economic architecture that works for peoples and planet. We express our deepest concerns at the attempts to undermine the independence of UNCTAD's policy analysis, weaken its normative functions, and subsume the role of the organization to other institutions, particularly those whose policy regimes continue to ossify a global division of labor that relegates developing countries to the lower end of the global economic system. We strongly believe that UNCTAD's role includes giving the utmost urgency to tackle the climate and ecological crisis, as well as the imperative to chart a speedy transition to a new feminist and care economy. It is essential that we shift the discourse on care by valuing and recognizing it as a public good, a collective social responsibility. Care has social as well as economic value. Recognizing the origins of and continuing contributors to the climate crisis and the impending chaos, civil society organizations call on UNCTAD to assist developing states in achieving a global Green New Deal. This means that governments must overhaul the rules of the international trade and monetary systems so that all countries, in particular developing ones, can carry out the necessary government investments to decarbonize economies. Climate finance is crucial if we want to stop dangerous climate change. UNCTAD should play an important role in monitoring climate finance and facilitating technology transfer policies to ensure decarbonization, a just recovery from COVID, and transition away from fossil fuels. States are failing to deliver on the social contract due to the constraints that trade agreements place on states' ability to regulate in the public interest. Consequently, we now have unacceptable concentrations of power that are fueling dangerous levels of inequality across nations and among socioeconomic groups. UNCTAD should contribute analytically and normatively to the urgent calls for an immediate agreement to the TRIPS waiver proposal, so that barriers to trade under the rubric of intellectual property can be removed to end the pandemic for all. A new digital economy based on redistributive justice is urgently needed. we call upon Unctad to uphold the technological sovereignty of developing countries as a foundational building block of the decolonization project in the data age. We exhort Unktad to unequivocally endorse a democratic, rules-based governance regime for the digital paradigm that can rein in big tech corporations and reimagine platform, data, and AI-supported production models towards economic self-determination of nations and peoples. We call on Unctad to expand its focus in both analytical and policy propositional terms on systemic reforms that can expand the fiscal space of developing countries. In particular, we call on Unctad, among other things, to advance its work towards a new, fair, global tax regime and a set of comprehensive taxation reforms to be defined in an open and transparent intergovernmental process within the framework of the United Nations. And this is one in which countries can participate as equals, and the public and civil society can hold negotiators to account for proposals and decisions. Colleagues, and may I say friends, anchoring this process in the UN is crucial to ensure that international tax discussions are in line with global commitments to uphold human rights, gender equality, and all dimensions of sustainable development, including the commitments to the Paris Agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Messiah. May I invite now this conference, please, to take note of the Civil Society Declaration. If there are no objections, let it be so decided. I'd now like to invite the representative of the youth, Ms. Roshana Trim, to present the declaration resultant from the Youth Forum. Roshana?
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, young people around the world, it is a pleasure to stand here to close the Unktad United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, and it is a pleasure to address you as Forum Leader of the Unctad Youth Forum. While I stand here as I am one voice, my message echoes from the hearts of the millions of young people around the world. The closure of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development offers the world an opportunity to do more, to emerge from the rubble of the global COVID-19 pandemic better than we were before, leaving no one behind. It is in this moment that the world and its leaders must take stock of the gross inequality and alarming injustices of the modern world. While COVID has disrupted many aspects of our lives, in many ways it has simply brought to the fore the daily reality of the world's most vulnerable. The lip service that has been paid is unacceptable. We cannot continue to play an amateur game of checkers with the lives of billions around the world, living in poverty, without access to water, housing, education, and other necessities. It is time for developed countries to put their money where their mouth is. It is time for us to be truthful about the consequences of our inaction. It is almost cruel for so many who contribute the most and have done little to reduce their carbon emissions to continue to discuss climate change while the countries on the front line of global warming have to deal with the repercussions and face frequent disasters. It should make us uncomfortable that many developed countries can provide booster shots to their populations, while many developing countries cannot secure vaccines for their population. Resilience and prosperity for all remains a pipe dream when we have not addressed the mistreatment of Haiti and Cuba. I am confident that based on the discussions at the UNCTAD 15 conference, as well as the leadership of Her Excellency Rebeca Grynspan and the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Mottley as Secretary General and Prime Minister and President respectively, that we can make up for lost time, building back better, bigger, and together. As young people around the world rise to the occasion, we expect global leaders to do the same. From inequality and vulnerability to equality and prosperity for all is the call. Show up and show out, pull up and change the rhythm. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Trim. I want to thank you and also to ask you to extend our thanks to all who have worked with you. May I invite the conference now to take note of the Youth Forum Declaration. If there are no objections, let it be so done. I'd now like to invite Dr. Tonya Haynes from the Institute of Gender and Development Studies of the University of the West Indies to present the declaration stemming from the Gender and Development Forum. Madam, you now have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam President, the Honorable Mia Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, Ms. Rebeca Grynspan, Secretary General of Unctad, joining us from Geneva, Ms. Isabelle Durand, Deputy Secretary General of Unctad, Ministers and Excellencies, distinguished guests. It is my sincere pleasure to stand here before you to deliver the declaration on behalf of the Gender and Development Forum. I worked with Professor the Most Honorable Viudine Barito, lead organizer of that forum, and we benefited from a global, and in particular Global South consultation. So when you see me, think of the thousands of women, feminists, allies who are behind our declaration. And I want to especially recognize Anita Nayar, co-chair of the Gender and Trade Coalition, one of our partners of the forum, as well as UN Women Multi-Country Office Caribbean. During the 3 days of the Gender and Development Forum, we have interrogated UNCTAD's mandate against the intersecting crises, the pandemic, the climate crisis, and the economic crises, to contribute to a feminist reshaping of the discourse on trade and development. UNCTAD and member states have a wider responsibility to transform trade, finance, and investment policies, informed by gender and social justice analyses and consistent with the Sustainable Development Goals. The forum necessarily charted a broad agenda, including trade, systemic macroeconomic issues such as finance, debt, taxation, and the power imbalances of the global political economy in which unjust relations of gender endure. We join with the Gender and Trade Coalition in calling on UN member states to restore the primacy of gender justice over the economic goals of trade and investment policies. This includes a complete transformation of global macroeconomic governance, including the current trade and investment systems, towards one that is based on human rights and respect for life and ecosystems, and that advances sustainable development. Without addressing the adverse impact of current trade and investment rules on women and gender nonconforming peoples, we would not be able to tackle the deepening inequality and exploitation. We call on UN member states to ensure the substantive and transparent inclusion of a broad group of stakeholders, including women's groups, throughout trade policy and agreement negotiations, improving democratic engagement of all UN member states in global negotiations. UNCTAD should be mandated to provide technical assistance to enhance the capacity of trade ministry officials and other stakeholders to engage in and redesign trade agreements. We call on UN member states to require that trade policy measures take a gender mainstreaming perspective, whereby all trade agreements under negotiation are assessed according to their positive and negative impacts on women and gender non-conforming peoples, with policy being designed accordingly. Trade policy can only be sustainable if policies are transformed to achieve economic goals based on a participatory and inclusive feminist economic paradigm. This means an economy in which care is valued and recognized as a public good, and the economy serves well-being objectives vis-a-vis growth in productivity. This paradigm ensures women's human rights are protected as part of a global vision for social justice, human rights, and environmental protection. We call on UN member states to pledge that UNCTAD will function from a broad mandate in which the international debt and tax structure, the ongoing digital transformation of the global economy, and the changing nature of work are discussed in relation to trade policy. We call on UN member states to uphold the UN Regional Agreement on Access to Information, Public Participation, and Justice in Environmental Matters in Latin America and the Caribbean, which seeks to address extractivism in this region and its high incidence of linked threats and killings of environmental and climate justice activists, a number of whom are indigenous women. We applaud UNCTAD and the host country's decision to mount this inaugural Gender and Development Forum. We demand that UNCTAD and member states provide supportive credit facilities and physical security infrastructures and protection for women involved in cross-border trading. We consider that there is no other time but now to focus on and redress these relations of inequalities between and within countries. We commend the significant feminist analytical capacity that exists in civil society networks such as the Gender and Trade Coalition, and we recommend that Unctad, the International Trade Center, and the WTO institutionalize biennial consultative meetings between CSOs and these UN and international bodies. We call on UNCTAD to incorporate a Gender and Development Forum as a stand-in forum of all future quadrennial conferences. I thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haynes. May I invite the conference, as it takes note of this declaration by the Gender and Development Forum, to also take note that I suspect we've created a bit of history at UNCTAD 15 by having Dr. Haynes, the first female Secretary General, along with the first female President, along with the first female Deputy SG, something that probably would not have been anticipated in 1964 when we started. So let us take note of this declaration, but also let us take note of progress. If so, let it be so decided. Thank you. I'd like now to invite Dr. Annalie Bab, the co-lead of the forum on creative industries, trade digitization, to present to the floor. And may I say that I'm a little surprised that the absence of recognition on the acknowledgement of the female leadership of this conference, given how far we've had to come. So, thank you.
Madam President, Madam Secretary General, Madam Deputy Secretary General, Minister in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Barbados, delegates, colleagues all. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of my co-lead organizer, Mr. Adrian Green, and the participants of UNCTAD 15's Creative Industries Trade Digitization Forum, which took place last week in a virtual format under the theme Inequality at the Root, Industrializing Creativity, Technology, and Innovation for a More Equitable Future. It is an honor to share highlights from our deliberations and to present for your kind consideration the Bridgestone Accord on the creative industries and trade digitization. As we celebrate the historic significance of UNCTAD 15 as the first of its kind to be hosted by a Caribbean country and small island developing state, the first to be delivered in a virtual format, and the first to showcase growing synergies between the creative industries and the digitization of trade in a single forum, we soberly acknowledge the world is dangerously out of balance, with existential crises, including the coronavirus pandemic, the climate emergency, rising global inequality, and escalating vulnerabilities, causing untold harm to those least able to bear the costs. We are particularly mindful that middle and low-income households in the Global South and the small island developing states like Barbados are on the front lines of a conflict no one can win unless we all embrace the need to reimagine and rewrite the rules of the game for global trade and development in ways that are more compassionate, more egalitarian, and more mindful of the ecological limits to economic growth. However, we cannot reimagine, rewrite, and rebalance the rules of the game without also understanding the flawed thinking that got us to this most precarious moment. As the Creative Industries Trade Digitization Forum explored the inequality at the root of the global systems shaping culture, creativity, and technology, we noted that the condition of the poorest of the poor can only be improved if the richest among us reduce their own consumption and use of the world's finite resources. While the creative economy accounts for 3% of global GDP, we also agreed that colonial trade networks continue to persist globally that focus on extractive value, exacerbating historical imbalances in the cultural, creative, and technological sectors. While UNCTAD's Digital Economy Report 2021 identifies the expansion of data flows as critical to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, we also recognize that those data flows are dominated by just 2 countries in the world, accounting for almost 90% of the market capitalization of the world's largest digital platforms. Just this week, we experienced how harmful that imbalance is to the countries of the Global South, as outages of Facebook-powered services, including Instagram and WhatsApp, disrupted communities, communications, and business models worldwide, hurting the creators and small businesses who depend on these dominant platforms for their livelihoods. Our forum highlighted the limited capacity of small island developing states and the Global South to reap sustained and sustainable value from the technologies and platforms fueling global economic growth, even as we are experiencing accelerating digitization and the impacts as it impacts all aspects of our human existence. In exploring ways to reclaim space for ourselves in this data-driven digital economy, our forum examined creative, cultural, and technological emancipation, nurturing mindfulness amid disruption, creating our own intersections in small island developing states and the Global South, accelerating social good in the creative and tech sectors, fintech and financial inclusion, NFTs and the promise of digital emancipation, immersive tech environments, world building and cultural expansion, gaming, and 21st century skills to shape innovative minds, among many other areas. We also developed productions, an educational platform, creative tech companies and concepts we are building for the future, including Tales in the Forest, New Bridge City, Intersections, and the Free Space Digital Art Gallery. Our explorations and offerings will continue to be available online as we call on UNCTAD and its member states to endorse the Bridgestone Accord for the creative industries and trade digitization. We fully endorse the institutionalization by UNCTAD of the Creative Industries Trade Digitization Forum as a standing forum of all future quadrennial conferences. I'd like to take this moment, Madam President, to acknowledge the team behind the Creative Industries Trade Digitization Forum and thank them for their amazing work over the course of many months. Co-lead organizer, Mr. Adrian Green, who is here in Barbados in the audience, Mrs. Michelle Hinkson-Cox, Ms. Nancy Yearwood, Ms. Serena Ricci, Mr. Matthew Springer, Mr. Omar Kennedy, and Mr. Java Seeley. Madam President, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bab, and may I note that this was the first time I believe that we've had a Creative Industries Trade Digitization Forum. So we truly thank you for the work done by you and Mr. Green and the team. If there are no objections, let it be so decided. Let us consider now agenda item 9A, the periodic review by the conference of the list of states contained in the annex to the General Assembly Resolution 1995-19. The membership of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development and of the Trade and Development Board is listed in document TD/B/INF/.250. Paragraph 6 of the General Assembly Resolution 1995/19 as amended states that the list of states contained in the annex to that resolution, and I quote, shall be reviewed periodically by the conference in the light of changes in the membership of the conference and other factors, unquote. The list was last reviewed by the conference at its 14th session in 2016. I would like to invite this conference to endorse the list as contained in document TD/B/INF.250. If there are no objections, please let it be so decided. Colleagues, we now will consider item 9B, report of the Trade and Development Board to the conference. Pursuant to paragraph 22 of the General Assembly Resolution 1995-19, the attention of the conference is drawn to the reports of the Trade and Development Board submitted to the General Assembly since the 14th session of the conference. I now invite the conference to take note of the reports of the sessions of the Trade and Development Board since the 14th session of the conference as contained in TD/521. It is so decided. We will now take up agenda item 9C, financial implications of the actions of this conference. Under this item, I would now like to invite our Secretary General, Ms. Rebeca Grynspan, to take the floor. Secretary General.
Thank you very much, dear Prime Minister. We were together just yesterday, so you see communications. I want to also greet the Chair of the Committee of the Whole, Ambassador Maimuna Tarishi of Tanzania, friends of the Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I will take the floor later on for my concluding remarks, so I will extend my thanks to everybody. But right now, according to item 9C, financial implications of the actions of the conference, I wish to inform you that I see no immediate document. I will consult with the divisions on what adjustments need to be made to our program of work and activities to deliver on the agreements and promises of the Bridgestone Covenant, and in consequence, the resources that are needed for those, including assessing how we organize ourselves in order to do so. As you know, we are in the concluding phase of the 2022 proposed budget considerations, and the necessary adjustments will be proposed to be made in the framework of the 2023 program plan. We will be coming to you in November 2021 in the context of the preparatory session of the Working Party to discuss how to formulate our 2023 program of work, taking into consideration our commitments under Bridgestone Covenant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam SG. Let us now turn to item 10, adoption of the report of the conference to the General Assembly. I'd now like to give the floor to the rapporteur to present the report of the conference. Over to Geneva. Thank you.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Madame la Présidente, Excellences, distingués collègues, Mesdames et Messieurs, j'ai l'honneur de vous présenter le projet de rapport de la 15e session de la Conférence des Nations Unies sur le commerce et le développement, qui sera disponible sous format électronique. Le rapport final comprendra 3 parties. La première partie comportera les mesures prises par la conférence au titre des différents points de l'ordre du jour, y compris le document final et la déclaration politique. La deuxième partie du rapport comportera le résumé par le Président des séances plénières d'ouverture et de clôture et des 8 événements de haut niveau de la conférence. Conformément aux lignes directrices éditoriales des Nations Unies, ils sont simplement destinés à rendre compte de façon concise des principaux sujets débattus lors des réunions. La troisième partie traitera des questions de procédure et des questions connexes. Le pacte de Bridgestone et l'esprit de Spacetown seront contenus dans 2 annexes au rapport qui sont déjà en ligne. Le rapport reflètera également les débats de cette plénière de clôture. Je vous remercie, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much. May I take it that the report of the conference is adopted with the understanding that it will be finalized, taking into account the proceedings of today, and then be submitted to the General Assembly in due course. If there are no objections, let it be so decided. My friends, I just want to share a few closing remarks with us. We've come to the conclusion of almost a year of intense discussions, and negotiations culminated, very thankfully, into the Bridgestone Covenant this morning and the spirit of Spacetown, our political declaration. I commend all of the negotiators for the excellent work and persistence despite the difficulties imposed by the largely virtual format of this process. It has worked much better than any of us could ever have contemplated, Madam DSG. I want to take a moment to express my deep appreciation to the very small but the very talented and dedicated team of Barbadian and Caribbean officials who have brought us to this point safely, both here and in Geneva. We've been able to shape regional positions that have contributed successfully to this moment. I want to thank you, Chantal, from OTN, our CARICOM Office of Trade Negotiations, for the heavy lifting. Shani, wherever you are. Carlos, I can't see you, wherever you are. Wharton, the CARICOM team generally. I want to thank our very own Sandra Husbands, who has flown and worked flat out in Geneva. But I also want to thank Ambassador Blackman, who is here with us. I saw him, but I don't know where he's gone, who has truly done heavy lifting from the very beginning, even to get this conference off the ground. Without him, we might not have been here at all. Similarly, without Ambassador Marshall's leadership, we would not be here today. And I want to thank her and her very dedicated team, and for finally saying yes after many no's. You now see why I say I'm a Jimmy Cliff girl. You can get it if you really want, but you must try and try and try. You will succeed at last. I've already thanked Peter and Sharon for keeping this conference so ably and professionally anchored. But I want to thank Minister Jerome Walcott and PS Simone Rudder and the entire Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade team, Chief of Protocol, all who have contributed to being able to be here today and to allow us to get here safely. The outcome documents have been duly approved, but that, as you know, and as I said at the beginning of this week, is really the beginning of the journey. We must now all summon the political will to act boldly and to act with dispatch to implement what we have decided. 3 centuries ago, Bridgestone and Speightstown were thriving commercial centers and hubs of trade, not always for good reasons, as we know. Indeed, for reasons that many have become ashamed of. That trade, however, nonetheless took place between Africa, Europe, and the New World. Let us not forget that we have a responsibility to master the architecture without mimicking the immorality. And if we can do that, then I believe that these 2 documents will come to be associated with a resurgence in the trade and development fortunes of developing countries, an enhanced spirit of cooperation between North and South, as well as among countries within the South. In the words of the late Jonathan Sachs, and I quote, "Covenant occurs when 2 individuals or groups, differing perhaps in power, but each acknowledging the integrity and sovereignty of the other, pledge themselves in mutual loyalty to achieve together what neither can achieve alone." We have had to use these words locally, and I find no better words to describe what is required of us globally. When I speak about global moral strategic leadership, it is to these words that I go. And that is why we chose to name the outcome document the Bridgestone Covenant. For that covenant represents our ministers across the world's strong belief that our current and future development challenges can only be met if we work together in common cause. You've heard President Kenyatta, President Ali from this platform in this room. You've heard all of the others who participated in our World Leaders Forum repeat that. You heard the UN Secretary General, as he helped to open this conference, repeat that. We recognize that this will only truly be possible through a healthy respect and practice of multilateralism, but a multilateralism that is strengthened and revitalized with institutions that are fit for purpose and relevant to our 3rd decade, 21st century realities, and not simply institutions sticking to a 20th century agenda. There is an urgent need to rebuild and refocus our institutions, and in so doing, rebuild that critical issue of trust. We also recognize that inequality and vulnerability, the central concerns of this conference, and may I say, when we set out to have this theme, it was before COVID. And little did we know that COVID would make the choice of this theme even all the more apt for the global discussions in which we are engaged. It was a case, perhaps, of future events casting their shadows when we settled it. But that issue of inequality and that issue of vulnerability haven't only been compounded by the COVID crisis, but also by the ensuing debt crisis that has come, and we hope to avoid a financial crisis. And as if all of that were not enough, then we have the climate crisis. This moment in time, when all of these daunting challenges converge, calls for extraordinary leadership and courage at all levels of society. I have asked, and I ask again, are we up to the task? And will we exhibit the resilience of generations before who faced equally daunting challenges? Or are we so still consumed in a culture of contentment that we have forgotten how to fight and how to be resilient? The future of generations to come depends truly on the decisions that we will make now. I believe that the outcome documents we've approved today can serve as a helpful benchmark in each instance. But if they're to be more than paper targets or paper gathering dust, then they must be matched by strong political will and decisive action. Let us therefore make a start. I've already indicated in conversations with the Secretary General yesterday and to the conference a number of things that are of deep concern to us to have resolved as we go forward over the next 3 days. One, of course, is the area and the reality that UNCTAD must keep close to its original purpose, that it must be the voice of developing countries as we seek to deal with issues of trade and development, and to create that platform that ultimately will lead from inequality and vulnerability to prosperity. That was why we chose the theme, because we believe truly in the original mission of this organization. But we accept that there are new ways of trading in today's world. And as I indicated to the conference yesterday, those new ways of trading must be met by new and fair trade rules. And there are some areas that we simply have not addressed. The world is now not only seeing trade across airports and seaports, but as we've already indicated, across internet ports. And what we are now seeing is the largest privatization of trade possibly in the history, modern history, and it therefore means that we have to find ways of reviewing and regulating how that trade is conducted, because persons simply with the manipulation of algorithms can do things that none of us can literally manage and contend with. There are no rules now. Similarly, we indicated that that private oligopoly really has to be accountable to ensure that if we are to move from vulnerability if we're to move from vulnerability to prosperity, then we have to confront the reality of how that private oligopoly functions. We've also indicated, and we need no reminder because we feel it every day, that there must be a clear and present effort to establish a global clearinghouse for vaccines and other critical public goods that the world may need, not just today, but going forward. The example of countries with money, not asking for charity, but with money, not being able to purchase critical vaccines to save lives, while other countries purchase and lock off 5 times what is needed for their population, is an example of immoral conduct that does not do well and will not lead us to any serious and safe place as it relates to the saving of lives and the containment of this pandemic. And then we also indicated that we must find a way not just to deal with food security, because cheaper food through trade only leads to greater health costs, as we now know in this pandemic. We need nutrition security, not just food security. And of course, the last major item relates to the fact and recognition that trade, finance, and debt are inextricably linked. And without a rules-based system that allows us to have internationally agreed and impartially applied rules, for example, on the publication of lists that negatively affect countries and cause countries to have to spend money to deal with the enhanced due diligence measures that flow from those lists, we have an unfair trade action that literally inhibits countries' capacity to go forward. Similarly, we must find innovative ways to create safe assets so as to ensure that the cost of borrowing of developing countries does not continue to be multiples times the cost of borrowing for a few developed countries who use their safe assets as the international reserve assets of the world. And of course, the last one that I raised with the Secretary General, that we may have to move to looking at reviewing the rigid use of a 60% debt to GDP fiscal anchor, largely because we are likely to face a world that will exceed the 1.5 degrees, and in that respect, we are going to have to find serious money in adaptation, and we will need the fiscal space to be able to spend those funds that are there for adaptation. If not, we will see failed states, climate migration, and regrettably, loss of lives. These things, in addition to the modalities discussed with Secretary General Grynspan, namely the potential of 3 meetings that will focus on 1, trade, logistics, and transport in particular, and the costs of transport, increasing the cost of goods and cost of living for our ordinary citizens. We see this as the most important initial forum that we need to have next year, so that we can begin to deconstruct why our people across the world are facing extraordinarily high increases in the cost of movement of goods across the global community. The second one will focus on investment, and the third one will be on the new area of creative industries, which is so important to our small island developing states, but particularly our Caribbean civilization, that allows us to be able to plot our way forward. Fellow delegates for the host country, one of the most exciting and rewarding aspects of UNCTAD 15, and the one that you may not have had time to follow in the heat of the negotiating process, has been the 5 fora that we just referred to. The virtual format allowed them to be convened sequentially in the 2 weeks leading up to the opening of this conference, thus maximizing the potential audience that they would have as they discuss the many issues that you heard them report on today. The good news is that if you've missed them, they're in the resources library of the virtual platform, and I commend them to all of you to go and look at. I certainly intend to go and look at the ones that I've missed. You've also heard the spokespersons, and I want to thank those lead spokespersons at this point in time, but also the persons who were coordinators. Mr. Peter Williams, who is not here, for the Global Commodities Forum, Roshana Trim and your team for the Youth and Civil Society, Annalie Bab, Dr. Annalie Bab and Adrian Green for the Creative Industries Trade Digitization Forum, Dr. Tonya Haynes and the Most Honorable Udine Barato for the Gender and Development Forum, and of course Chantal Monroe-Knight for the Civil Society Forum as well. Excellencies, delegates, friends, Secretary General Grynspan, I give you my commitment that during this time with my presidency of UNCTAD, that I will use my advocacy as best as I can to advance the UNCTAD agenda that you have adopted, and to remind the international community of the raison d'etre of this conference, of why there is something called the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, to provide that space for the voices of the developing world to be heard, and for policies to be agreed upon to meet the trade and development priorities. When last I was in Geneva and delivered the Raoul Prebisch Lecture in 2019, I said then that it was regrettably a concern to me that the voices of the small countries of the world were not being heard, and that it seemed as though we were invisible and disposable. We are not clearly invisible, but I'm not sure that our voices are being heard sufficiently. And how we come out of this pandemic, how we come out of the climate crisis, how we come out of the looming debt crisis will determine to what extent those words will come to haunt or not. I know that you, Secretary General Grynspan, and Deputy Secretary General Durand, I know that you have been there with us and that you have our back on this journey. I am in no doubt that this will be a very difficult journey. It has never been easy to alter the status quo, and it will not be easy on this occasion. The only difference is that we have to work harder than any previous generation, because what is at stake is our planet and our way of life. Thank you very much. I'd like now, formally, to give the floor to Secretary General Grynspan in this, your first formal action as Secretary General in an Unctad conference. And let me say that we are truly honored to have worked with you and will continue to work with you. But in addition, we are impressed at the way in which you have literally landed and come to shore one time, as we would say in Barbados, having only come to this job since September. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Let me first yield the floor, if you allowed me, before I make my final remarks, to Isabel Dugan, our DSG, who has been so instrumental for this conference, and that is now in Barbados, as you have seen. So for Isabel Duran to share with you the process that yield to the conference we are concluding today. Later on, I will continue with my final remarks. Isabel, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. And dear Mia, dear Prime Minister, of course I'm delighted to be here today in Barbados with you and with all the Barbadian colleagues, friends. We receive a warm welcome, and we are from the beginning of the week, and frankly, I thank you for that. It was really very important to succeed. And as we bring this historic conference to a close, a certain close, because I heard that there was a lot of things on our path for the future, but I would like to briefly take you back in time to 12th of March, when Prime Minister Motley and I have had our first direct conversation about the conference, and especially about the format of the conference. And honestly, I was a bit apprehensive. I knew how crucial a physical conference was for Barbados, and I knew the amount of work that had already gone into the previous months for the preparation. So it was also simply impossible to say what the COVID situation would be 7 months later. So postponing again was not an option, and time was running, and we needed a format that would allow all our membership to participate. But finally and rapidly, we decided to go for a virtual conference. We had an agreement, not only a virtual conference, but a creative virtual conference, an innovative virtual, an inclusive virtual. And you said it beautifully, Madam Prime Minister, at our UNCTAD 15 launch. If we cannot bring you to Barbados, we will bring Barbados to you. And it's true that I hope that the colleagues in Geneva and everywhere in the world have had the chance to feel the Barbados spirit. So also, we did not only want a 4-day conference in October, we wanted to create a real buzz around the major challenges of trade and development as a so crucial moment. And we wanted a process starting as early as possible, mobilizing all stakeholders on the devastating consequences of COVID and the most vulnerable. And it was really well explained the last 4 days and just now. So it was also, it have to be a rendezvous that neither UNCTAD nor Barbados could miss. A conference where the voice, what you explained very well, the voice of the Global South will finally be heard, because if not here and now, then where and when? So the day after, we started really rapidly. Our respective teams reset preparation, which were very well coordinated by a tireless and determined duo. They are in the room here, and frankly, I thank you very much. But also with a lot of actors and a lot of staff from both sides of the Atlantic. And this despite Hurricane Elsa, I remember. Also despite the volcanic eruption in St. Vincent, which were really difficulties in the preparation process. So the past months have indeed put on the table urgent discussions about financing for development, debt, digitalization, technology transfer, value chain, climate adaptation, productive capacities, commodities, and I could continue the list of the issues that we discussed the last days, and also the last months, because since April, we have organized 48 pre-events in addition to the 5 fora, 48 pre-events that ended just before the conference. We have also held 5 fora: Global Commodities, Civil Society, Youth, Gender and Development, Creative Industry and Trade Digitalization Forum. We just heard from the head of those fora the declaration, but this short presentation do not reveal the energy and engagement of hundreds of people involved in each activity, each forum, each pre-event. And so often, civil society or activists show the way. And I think that I invite you also to look and to watch all what was said during those days, because that something could inspire us. So we know also that not all were equally able to virtually connect and participate, especially in LDCs. And thanks to the generosity of the government of Canada, we were able to design a type of decentralization of the conference in 16 LDCs by hosting virtual connections, hubs, and supporting some 50 events through an excellent collaboration with the UN regional coordination offices. And that's also important, that the new way to organize a conference could be also on this way and through the virtual means decentralized in order to offer to all the part of the world to participate. In the meantime, member states, under the guidance of Ambassador Viega, conducted the PrepCom process through unprecedented and virtual means. In a time, I remember, a lot of us had doubts, even Chad Blackman, I remember the discussion that we have had at that time. All of us, we had doubts that the negotiation could be carried out virtually. But it was done, you did it, and frankly, congratulations. Also, Ambassador Viega passed the baton to Ambassador Maimouna Kibenga Tarishi, who demonstrated her subtle but efficient leadership. She was supported by a solid group of friends, Ambassador Viega, her predecessor, Ambassador Gaffe, who was so helpful. Remember you, Madam Prime Minister, the discussion in the beginning when you were a candidate for hosting the conference. Ambassador Gaffe helped us a lot in the negotiating process at that time. Also Ambassador Badura and Ambassador Swescom, who planted the seeds for a more active engagement within the TDB presidencies. So the sense of the importance of the moment was shared by all delegations. Now, our roadmap is clear, yes, strong, clear, determined, and be assured you can count on us to implement it without any reservation. The Bridgestone Covenant, and I like how you remind us what means a covenant. The Bridgestone Covenant is our compass, and we are accountable to deliver it. And for those various stakeholders here in Barbados, but also elsewhere in the world, that are so committed and ambitious and expect UNCTAD to provide more, faster, stronger, be assured that we hear you and that we'll try to do our best to do that in the spirit of this covenant. So sincerely, a big warm thank you to all of you. Grand merci à tous et à toutes. Muchas gracias a todos. It's now formally the end of this conference, but Madam Grynspan will continue with her final remark. And just to say that after this final remark, we have a lot of things to do, and I'm sure that Prime Minister Motley will follow us very closely to really implement it on a way which is really in the spirit of this covenant. So, thank you.
So,
I really want to thank Isabel and invite Secretary General Grynspan. But if you can, Secretary General, I really do want to thank and salute DSG Durand for ably stepping in when she needed to and ensuring that there was no vacuum whatsoever in the organization of this conference. I apologize for the intervention.
Madam President, Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, I must begin by using my favorite word these days, thank you. Thank you, Barbados, for hosting us so generously, so diligently, so purposefully. As has been said many times during this conference, never has a country so small been a stage so large, a stage where the whole world could literally fit. This is an achievement of the government of Barbados, led by the Prime Minister Mia Mottley, her great cabinet with the national coordinator, Teresa Marshall, and her team, with Sandra Husband here, that has been here in Geneva with you, as well as all the people of this amazing island, so separated by the sea and yet so close to us all. Thank you from the heart, Prime Minister Mottley. You have been a wonderful leader for this conference. Thank you. I must also give big thanks to the chair of the Committee of the Whole, Ambassador Maimuna Tarishi of Tanzania, and thank you very much for all the work that has gone during all these months and weeks. As been said before, I want to thank the friends of the chair, the ambassadors from Lebanon, from Panama, from Ireland, and from Argentina. Thank you very much. And I want to thank the former presidents of the board, also the ambassador of Argentina, under whom we had the first draft of the outcome document. Thank you very much, Federico. And Michael Gaffey, that was the president before Argentina, and the PrepCom was established during his tenure too. So thank you also, Ambassador Gaffey. I want to thank all the member states for their support and the participation of the heads of states and ministers in our ministerials and our plenaries. And that was fantastic, and I want to really thank very much the ambassadors in Geneva that really helped us to make that possible. Thank you to all of you and your teams. Especially, I want to thank the group of coordinators and focal points for the negotiations, and the speakers and experts that inform the discussions. Thank you all very much. And I want to thank the organizations that organized the fora, the Gender and Development Forum, the Youth Forum, the Civil Society Forum, the Cultural and Creative Industries that we spoke today, that we heard today. Their deliberations really enrich our discussions and our negotiations, and that will continue to be so in the future. Thank you very much to you, all of you. I must also give special thanks to my team at UNCTAD, and very especially to Isabel Duran, the Deputy Secretary General, who for 8 crucial months was acting Secretary General of the institution. Isabel, thank you for the great job you have done together with the team in OSG and all the divisions of UNCTAD and the directors of this organization. A wonderful job. Thank you all very much. The great people at UNCTAD have delivered immensely, giving me tremendous trust, hope, and enthusiasm for the years ahead. I must add that despite being forced to go digital in record time, this conference's virtual format turned out to be a great success. This last week, I felt that we were really at two places at the same time, inhabiting the same room, somewhere between Bridgestone and Geneva. Seeing what we have achieved this week, it is clear this conference clearly couldn't be postponed any longer. We really needed to meet and talk and agree on common action plans for a common recovery. So thank you, Unctad, and thank you, Barbados, for not giving up, for making the extra effort, for matching the scale of the moment and putting all of this together. Let me again thank all the countries that heeded Unctad's call and also sought to match the scale of the moment. During this conference, we had more than 100 countries participating with direct statements. We had 5,300 participants in the high-level dialogues and ministerial roundtables. We had the Secretary General of the UN and also the Deputy Secretary General of the UN, whom I really thank from my heart because they made a very important effort to be with us in Barbados. The Secretary General especially was with us in the inauguration with a great speech that inspired all of us. And I thank the heads of state, the Minister of Trade and the Economy, the chiefs of the UN agencies and multilateral development banks. We had Nobel Prize-winning economists, as well as representatives from global trade, financial, and as we said before, youth and civil society organizations. I thank all of you, really not only for coming, but for what you came here to do and what you eventually did. Throughout this conference, we experienced an atmosphere conducive to agreement, an atmosphere where consensus was proactively sought, and where it was actually reached on many new and crucial areas. Now, this does not mean that we agree on everything. Sometimes we agree to disagree. But you gave us an instrument to work with and take the agenda forward. We spoke, and most importantly, we listened and debated. You know, this reminds me of some words of Ijeoma Olu that it impacted me some years ago. And she said, and I quote, "Our humanity is worth a little discomfort. It's actually worth a lot of discomfort, because the journey towards true equity within diversity is not for all of us to feel comfortable, but all of us to feel a little bit uncomfortable. Discomfort means that no one has the upper hand, that each of us feels the burden to put oneself, has the upper hand, that each of us feels the burden to put oneself on the other's shoes. I must therefore thank you all for helping us build that atmosphere of dialogue and collaboration. Our views were not taken for granted. Our decisions were taken in diversity, with all voices present. So, dear friends, the outcome document of the 15th UN Conference on Trade and Development is the daughter of our collective effort. To find consensus among such a wide audience and countries and stakeholders is not an easy thing. We showed deep awareness of the historical moment we are in. All of us recognize, and I quote the outcome document, that this crisis unearthed and accentuated existing vulnerabilities and weaknesses, that inequalities were fueling discontent with globalization and multilateralism, that the achievements made over the years in sustainable development may be compromised by the pandemic, and the development gap between and within countries may widen. This is what our research shows too. The outcome document recognize precisely this. Recognize that following a very divergent crisis, we are now witnessing deeply divergent recovery as well, with advanced countries growing and vaccinating at rates many times greater than those in the developing world. If this trajectory continues, we recognize we will leave many people behind. And there are many reasons behind this divergence, and we heard Prime Minister Motley, and we heard the Secretary General Guterres. But no doubt, the inequalities we are witnessing in the access to vaccines and financial resources are today at the very heart of this divergence. And we have heard during all these days the voices of many world leaders on the urgent need to close these gaps and save lives and livelihoods with more equitable access to vaccines and financial resources. The outcome document also recognizes that a recovery which brings the world back to the development paradigm that existed before the pandemic will be insufficient. So we don't want to go to the old normal. We women don't want to go to the old normal. Indeed. We want a new normal, a better normal. In a word, we recognize that this pandemic, whose reach none of us could have foreseen, was made worse by its interaction with the consequences of climate change and environmental degradation, high inequalities, and the weakening of the multilateral system. Next, we agreed on what needs to be done. Some of these agreements reinforce and renew previous ones. Our text reaffirms the Paris Agreement on climate change, the 2030 Agenda, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, the commitment in ODA, 0.7% of GDP, the non-reciprocal preferential access for LDCs, and the common framework for debt treatment, among others, as well as the need, and I quote, of promoting a universal, rules-based, open, transparent, predictable, inclusive, non-discriminatory, and equitable multilateral trading system under WTO rules. This is something we reaffirm in every conference and which we will never stop reaffirming. This was, no doubt, another important topic brought by many of the leaders that we heard during these days. The trade restrictions, the tariffs and non-tariff measures that we have seen during this pandemic and before. According to our research, non-tariff measures have the cost double or triple the cost of the tariff measures in the world. And the LDCs have lost like 12%, if I remember correctly, Paul, of GDP because of non-tariff measures. So we will continue to work on those issues that are fundamental and on the logistics. We heard also Prime Minister Motley, the spiking transport prices that we are experiencing in the world, and that the first organization to emphasize that was precisely UNCTAD. There were also new agreements that sprang both in relation to the pandemic as well as to some more long-term issues. We agreed on the need to combat protectionism to help developing economies integrate positively to the multilateral trading system, to harness public and private investment. We agreed on the need to keep trade flows open and supply chains running to ensure the continued flow of vital medical and food supplies and equipment without creating these barriers we refer to, unnecessary barriers. We agreed on the importance to ensure timely, global, and equitable access to safe, effective, and affordable COVID-19 vaccines, therapeutics, diagnostics, and personal protective equipment. We agreed on the need to tackle the widening digital divide and on increasing international cooperation to promote data flow with trust, safety, and confidence in their use in accordance with national regulations and relevant international commitments. We agree on appreciating the special circumstances and vulnerability of certain countries, including those that are least developed, landlocked, and yes, Prime Minister, small island development states, and that those circumstances require special and differentiated treatment, and that much more work has to be done there, starting by recognizing that if the indicators are wrong, if we don't measure well, we take the wrong decisions. And that we finally, in this 21st century, will have to overcome the bad indicators that we have used for so long as proxies for development, because they are not. We agreed on recognizing the impact of a number of phenomena on trade and development, including health issues, maritime and industrial accidents, natural and man-made disasters, and displacement of people. And we agreed on the role of Unctad on issues related to illicit trade and illicit financial flows. And finally, in those areas in which there were stronger and more prolonged negotiations, such as the conversation around debt, relief, and tax cooperation, we agreed on common understandings and common messages, clearly showing we have the political will to move these issues forward. So, dear delegates, the Bridgestone Covenant agreements are structured on a key strategy based on 4 necessary transformations for the world to recover. And we heard before the statements referring precisely to this. First, transforming economies through diversification. Second, fostering a more sustainable and resilient economy. Third, improving the way development is financed. And fourth, revitalizing multilateralism. This broad strategy gives us here at Unctad very clear mandates going forward, mandates we receive with a great sense of duty, responsibility, and devotion. I pledge to you that we will focus our work during the next 4 years before we meet again to celebrate this time our 60th anniversary on these mandates you have given now us. I take to heart especially the idea, emphasized multiple times in the outcome document, of revitalizing multilateralism by revitalizing UNCTAD. To really match the scale of the moment, we must all work together and continue this dialogue in the pursuit of better policies and better solutions for the people we serve. I heard from the G77 today that we need to go from diagnostic to action and from action to concrete results. We are committed to that. It will be important to seek truly universal dialogues because our global challenges require global solutions. We all know that. I therefore humbly ask all of you, member states and regional representatives, to keep the great work you have done this week and to trust in us in being able to facilitate the many dialogues ahead without ever losing sight of the special circumstances of the developing countries that we have their voice to bring to the global arena. The path ahead is clear. This conference has given me hope. Change is indeed possible. A different recovery can and must be sought. We all know the risk of keeping with the current trajectory. More inequality, more vulnerability, weak multilateralism, we know are not the answer. Because the question is not whether we will eventually recover. All crises eventually end. But whether we will still be together once we do, whether we will be poorer or more polluted or more unequal or more fragile. We have the historic opportunity to change that trajectory so that we have a different result. This is what you have told us in the outcome document. And I have to assure you that we in UNCTAD will not relinquish any effort in trying to produce that different recovery, where we rebuild differently and together. We won't get there if we do it apart. Thank you again, all of you. And thank you also to UNOC and the technical services that have served this conference. I think that they deserve also a big applause from all of us. And I hope to count with your support in the journey ahead. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary General Grynspan, for those remarks. And thank you very much, as I said earlier, to DSG Durand for her remarks as well. Are there any delegations who would like to take the floor at this stage? I know time is tight, but I believe that there are some who had indicated that they would wish to do so, and I asked them just to be concise. Let me first invite the coordinator once again of the group of 77 and China. I'm not sure whether Ambassador Andisha is with us now or if his representative is there. Please.
Thank you very much, Madam Prime Minister. Presidents of the 15th session of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, Honorable Prime Minister Maya Motley, Secretary General of the Unctad, Ms. Rebeca Grynspan, distinguished dignitaries, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I first would like to convey the expression of gratitude to the government and people of Barbados. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, meeting at its 15th session in virtual Barbados, but also in virtuous Barbados, express its deep gratitude to the government and people of Barbados for their invitation to host the conference, for their efficiency, generosity of spirit, and dedication toward ensuring a successful conference despite the difficult circumstances due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Expresses its appreciation for the kindness and generosity to the government in bringing Barbados to the world despite the pandemic. Recognizing with great satisfaction the valuable contribution made by the host government to the deliberation and outcome of the conference, and thus bringing about a revitalized covenant for development. Expresses its conviction that through the efforts of the host country and the member states, an enhanced spirit of cooperation has been created, and that will further efforts to ensure prosperity for all. Request the President of the conference to convey these sentiments to the government of Barbados, and through her to the people of Barbados. This is on behalf of all the groups. And now, Madam Prime Minister, if you allow me, I have a statement on behalf of the group of 77 and China. Madam President, I am beginning with deep appreciation to you and the government and the people of Barbados for the hosting of UNCTAD 15 in these difficult times. Despite the fact that we did not have the conference in physical format, our host country, Barbados, ensured the conference is organized in a perfect manner, which resulted in the success we achieved today. So thank you very much for all your efforts, and appreciation to all who were involved in the successful organization of this conference. We also want to thank the chair of the TDB, whose leadership has been instrumental in the lead up to the conference. Ambassador Michael Gavey of Ireland, the preparation of the conference began under your leadership. Ambassador Federico Villegas of Argentina, who gave us the first draft of the conference document and made sure that we have a good start in the negotiations. And Ambassador Maimuna Tereshi of Tanzania, who steered us through the end. Excellencies, you performed an excellent job, and I want to convey the appreciation of my group to all of you. The chair was also supported by the friends who provided unwavering support to the process. Ambassador Gaffi, Ambassador Alberto Suscam, Ambassador Villegas, and Ambassador Salim Badura. Thank for all your support and efforts. This process was, of course, led by the regional coordinators who conducted the negotiations on the daily basis for the last 9 months and made sure that the conference is a success and an acceptable outcome document is ready for adoption today. I have witnessed the intense negotiations and the interaction of the group coordinators and the focal points, and I want to offer my gratitude for the hard work, dedication, flexibility, and their firm belief in the conference should be a success. Particularly, I thank Thomas Gorisek, the coordinator for the European Union, Sergei Ivanov, the coordinator for EAEU, David Skronsky, the coordinator for JUSCANS, and the representative of the United Kingdom, the Holy See. I would also like to thank my DPR, Mr. Shoaib Timuri, sitting beside me, who led the process from the G77 and China. Thank you very much, Shoaib. I believe that you all deserve a big applause for your leadership and dedication.
Thank you very much.
Let's not forget that the group coordinators were not alone and were supported by the focal points in their groups. The group of 77 and China, we had 17 member states serving as focal points. Please accept my sincere thanks and appreciation for your hard work and dedication. The negotiation process has been dynamic and complex. It was impossible to have an outcome document if we did not have the flexibility and understanding of all member states of the UNCTAD. So let me also thank the ministers, permanent representatives, and the experts for their valuable support for this success. The success of the conference, of course, is not possible without the valuable support of the Secretariat, and let me also convey my appreciation to all the staff of UNCTAD. I want to particularly appreciate the former Secretary General of UNCTAD, Dr. Kotoi, the current Secretary General, Madam Rebeca Grynspan, Deputy Secretary General, Madam Isabel Durand, and the Secretary of Trade and Development Board, Miguel Bautista, for their leadership and for support of the process. Let me also convey my gratitude to the Chief of the Liaison Team, Juan Jose Martinez Badillo. I think you deserve your full name to be pronounced here, because I always call you Juan. and pardon me if I didn't pronounce it properly. Juan, you and your team, and your able team, Michael and the others, excellently supported us. Thank you, and my appreciation also goes to the translators for their valuable support. Last but not least, I want to thank all including South Center, and the persons that offer support in this process. Madam President, today we are celebrating the adoption of the conference document. This document will serve for the member states and the Secretariat for the next 4 years. Therefore, the adoption of the conference document is only the beginning of even a more important process. We have more work to do. We should ensure the principles and the measures agreed in this document is implemented. Without support of each of you, full implementation of this covenant is impossible. The adoption of the Bridgestone Covenant coincides with the arrival of Secretary General Grynspan, our first female Secretary General, for the time being, the Secretary General of Unctad. And Madam Secretary General, you know there are only 2 Secretary Generals in the UN system. So you're one of them, and hopefully maybe the next. I believe this would serve as a unique opportunity to us to use the document as the basis to revitalize the role of Unctad. I urge the Secretary General to consider this document as her guide. The Group of 77 and China reaffirms its readiness to engage and provide any support required to ensure that the work of Unctad is a success and the Bridgestone Covenant is implemented in full. With this, let me thank you again and congratulate you for a very successful conference, and I thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador Andisha, for your very, very kind words, and also for thanking all who have been involved in this process at some point or another. I'd also like to remember Dr. Kitui, who obviously was with us when we started this process, and we thank him even though he is no longer with us. May I now invite the conference to adopt by acclamation the expression of gratitude to the government and people of Barbados, so eloquently moved by Ambassador Andisha, and I have a copy of it. Can we please adopt by acclamation? Thank you. It is so decided. I have now the pleasure to invite the Honorable Hugh Todd, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, on behalf of the Group of Latin American and Caribbean States. Thank you.
Her Excellency, the Honorable Mayor Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, and the President of the 15th session of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, Secretary General of UNCTAD, Ms. Rebeca Grynspan, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to deliver this statement on behalf of the Group of Latin American and the Caribbean Member States, GRULAC. We would like to first extend our warmest appreciation to the people and government of Barbados for successfully hosting and facilitating this important conference in these unprecedented times. We came together at this time in the midst of a global pandemic to make history. This year's UNCTAD 15 conference had significant meaning for the members of GRULAC. Not only was it held by a member of our region, the conference also came at a time when many of our members are still struggling to recover from the socioeconomic devastation caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. We therefore wish to commend all members for their engagement and participation, as the outcomes from the conference will support developing countries' recovery efforts over the next 4 years and beyond. Our virtual presence here to mark UNCTAD 15 highlighted the way that the pandemic has changed the manner in which key challenges could be discussed and negotiated. This, however, did not diminish the importance of our engagement. The willingness of members to engage in discussions despite the difficult circumstances proved to us how invested we all are in turning ideas into actions at UNCTAD and chart a path to prosperity for all. We are pleased to adopt an outcome document which we acknowledge is not perfect, but contains elements for all members to work together. As Gulak stated during the general debate, while the journey to prosperity for all may seem a heavy task, it is not insurmountable, and Gulak members remain committed to participating in actions and discussions to help us achieve our goal. In closing, it would be remiss if we neglected to recognize the extraordinary work of all those who played a role in making this conference a success. On behalf of GULAC, we wish to express our gratitude to the Honorable Prime Minister of Barbados, the Secretary General and her staff at UNCTAD, to the President of the Trade and Development Board and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. We also wish to thank the Friends of the Chair and facilitators, the conference staffers and interpreters, as well as the chief negotiators, who ably assisted together with all the focal points and their extremely hard work throughout this long and arduous process. It is GULAC's hope that this conference has paved the way for a deeper commitment by all stakeholders to a more inclusive and sustainable development, and we are committed to work with others to ensure progress for the next 4 years. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Todd, and I want to also publicly salute your President, President Irfan Ali, for his coming to Barbados and ensuring that he was part of this process for the first few days of this conference. I'd also like now to to invite Ambassador Thomas Wagner, speaking on behalf of the European Union and its member states, to take the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, Honorable Mia Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, Madam Rebeca Grynspan, Secretary General, dear Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I have the honor of speaking on behalf of the European Union and its member states. Today, we come to the end of a very different and challenging session of the UN Conference on Trade and Development. Preparations for this 15th session started almost 2 years ago. These preparations had to overcome many unexpected challenges and came up with most innovative and creative solutions to deliver on our shared objectives. I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of the EU and its member states to commend and express our gratitude to the Chair, Ambassador Tarishi of Tanzania, and Friends of the Chair, Ambassador Villegas of Argentina, Ambassador Gaffey of Ireland, Ambassador Badura of Lebanon, and Ambassador Suescum of Panama for their excellent work in steering the preparatory work for this conference. I would like also to thank all delegations for the constructive spirit they have demonstrated in the process, which was decisive in reaching a balanced and consensual outcome. This preparatory process, marked by the COVID-19 pandemic, has taught us many lessons in terms of how we can work more effectively and efficiently together. The spirit of Spacetown and the Bridgestone Covenant are only the pinnacle of this joint work. Allow me to highlight only a few noteworthy elements of the outcome documents. Despite at times difficult discussions, it is welcomed that the Covenant does not downgrade our shared belief in the importance of human rights, including gender equality, be it offline or online. We look forward to continue seeing UNCTAD's good work on women integration into local, regional and global economy. COVID-19 further exposed existing vulnerabilities already high on our agenda due to the urgent threat of climate change. Be it of certain groups of people, of local communities, or of entire countries, we welcome UNCTAD's continuous efforts to address these vulnerabilities through its work on sustainable economic diversification, productive capacity building, and promotion of enabling trade and investment environment, with closing the digital divide being the sine qua non for ensuring the success and inclusiveness of such action. The Covenant includes solid commitments on revitalizing the intergovernmental machinery, on results-based management, and on focus of work on UNCTAD's comparative advantage. The success of those commitments will, however, depend on the membership's joint commitment to deliver. Our efforts on this will determine the future of the intergovernmental pillar and of UNCTAD's ability to positively influence the global trade and development agenda. Saving it for the end, I would also like to thank and commend the work of the UNCTAD Secretariat and of course of the host country, Barbados, in preparation of this conference. It's no easy feat to organize a global conference with the ongoing logistical challenges, ensuring high-level and interesting panels, and provide continued support to the membership. Difficult decisions had to be made and innovative solutions found along the way. We would like to thank Deputy Secretary General Isabelle Durand and Honorable Mia Amor-Motley and their teams for always finding a way. But our work is not done. The success of this 15th session of the conference will also be determined on how the negotiated outcome, the Barbados Convent, is put into practice. In this sense, we strongly support the new Secretary General, Ms. Rebeca Grynspan, and especially her ambition to revitalize UNCTAD, ensure focused and constructive work, collaborate coherently with other organizations, and work with all UNCTAD member states towards our shared 2030 agenda. Clearly, the entire membership will need to play its part to make this possible, and I can only transmit the commitment of the EU and its member states as the largest development aid partner to wholeheartedly support Madam Grynspan in this onerous yet most necessary endeavor. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency for his remarks. I now invite His Excellency Ambassador Khalil Hashmi of Pakistan, speaking on behalf of the Asia-Pacific Group. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President, and if I may, Madam Prime Minister, Secretary General Unctad, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I have the honor to deliver these remarks on behalf of the Asia-Pacific Group. We thank the government of Barbados for successful hosting of this important conference and congratulate it for assuming the stewardship for the next 4 years. We also commend Secretary General UNCTAD, Ms. Rebeca Grynspan, and her entire team for their hard work in putting together this large conference in a hybrid mode concurrently in Bridgestone and Geneva, despite the several challenges posed by COVID pandemic. We are pleased with the adoption of Bridgestone Covenant and the Political Declaration made possible with the engagement and flexibility demonstrated by all. They capture the shared concerns, aspirations, and priorities of both the developed and developing countries with respect to the mutually reinforcing aspects of international trade, development, finance, investment, and technology, and how they are affected by the pandemic and the need for shaping effective responses. This means we all have our work cut out. The group looks forward to working closely with all stakeholders, especially UNCTAD, with an aspiration to move from decisions to actions. We'd like to commend our experts, Ambassador Thurishi, friends of the TDB chair, focal points from various groups and regional coordinators for their hard work over the course of more than a year. We also recognize the role and contribution made by the civil society. Finally, we would like to thank the UN staff here in the Palais and in Barbados, the interpreters, the conference service providers, and others who contributed and helped make this conference a success. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I'd like now to invite Ms. Patricia Holmes of Australia, speaking on behalf of Just Scans.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chair, Prime Minister Motley. I will make a brief closing statement on behalf of the JustCans Group. Madam Chair, I would like to warmly congratulate you and thank you, Barbados as host, Secretary-General Grynspan, the Secretariat, and all Member States for making this a truly successful and significant conference, particularly in light of the unique and challenging circumstances we are all facing at this time. We have seen rich, productive exchanges that have shed light on key trade and development challenges and how we might work together better to tackle these. And these exchanges have come at a crucial time as we look to promote a global economic recovery from COVID-19. We welcome the Bridgestone Covenant and the careful negotiating process that went into reaching consensus. The Covenant charts a course for UNCTAD's work in coming years and sets out valuable policy analysis on trade and development. We note the political declaration and our understanding that this is a statement developed by Barbados that reflects its own perspective. We are pleased to welcome the UK into the JUSCANS group. This makes official the already close and constructive working relationship existing between JUSCANS members and the UK. I will close by reiterating JUSCAN's commitment to working with Secretary-General Grynspan and all UNCTAD member states to revitalise the organisation. Thank you again, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And I'd like now to invite Mr. Sergei Ivovnev from the Russian Federation to speak on behalf of the Eurasian Economic Union.
Уважаемая госпожа премьер-министр Барбадоса, уважаемая госпожа президент, уважаемая госпожа председатель Совета по торговле и развитию, уважаемая госпожа генеральный секретарь Unktad, ваше превосходительство, уважаемые делегаты. В своей краткой заключительной речи от имени группы стран-членов Евразийского экономического союза хотел бы в первую очередь адресовать слова благодарности виртуальной хозяйке конференции Барбадосу и руководству этой замечательной страны, которому в беспрецедентных условиях пандемии нового коронавируса в конструктивном взаимодействии с секретариатом UNCTAD удалось обеспечить оптимальный формат и успех нашего мероприятия. На наш взгляд, конференция действительно прошла успешно. Приняты содержательные итоговые документы сессии Бриджтаунский ковенант и политическая декларация Дух Спейкстауна. Убеждены, что эти документы UNCTAD-15 представляют хорошую основу для формирования широкой объединительной повестки, глобальной повестки дня по вопросам торговли и развития на ближайшую перспективу. Пользуясь случаем, хотели бы тепло поприветствовать госпожу Ребекку Грynсpan на посту генерального секретаря организации и пожелать ей успехов в реализации задач, зафиксированных в обновленном мандате UNCTAD. 15-й конференции предшествовала интенсивная подготовительная работа. Оценивая ретроспективно подготовительный этап, хотел бы отметить, что он прошел в целом успешно. От имени нашей группы хотел бы выразить признательность всем своим коллегам и региональным координаторам за проявленную добрую волю, максимальную гибкость и конструктивизм. Мы также высоко ценим существенный вклад в подготовительный процесс лично председателя Совета по торговле и развитию ее превосходительства посла Танзании госпожи Маймуны Тариши и ее друзей в лице уважаемых постоянных представителей Аргентины, Ирландии, Ливана и Панамы. Как всегда, эффективным было организационное содействие со стороны руководства и сотрудников служб межправительственной поддержки и лингвистического обеспечения. Закончить свое выступление хотелось бы на оптимистичной ноте. Важный вывод, который мы извлекли из напряженного процесса подготовки и проведения UNCTAD-15, это то, что, как нам кажется, мы стали лучше, если не понимать, то, по крайней мере, слышать друг друга. Это внушает надежду. Как правильно заметила госпожа премьер-министр Барбадоса, мы в самом начале долгого пути. И мы обречены на то, чтобы пройти его вместе, если мы хотим, чтобы подлинный, инклюзивный и справедливый мультилатерализм стал неотъемлемой частью современного миропорядка, а замечательный лозунг 15-й конференции «От неравенства и уязвимости к процветанию для всех» превратился в практическое руководство к действию. Благодарю за внимание.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ivanov, for your remarks. I'd now like to invite Mr. Rayad Azwaja of Palestine to speak on behalf of the Arab group.
شكرا سيدة الرئيسة. طاب يومكم بربيدوس. يشرف دولة فلسطين إلقاء هذه المداخلة الختامية باسم المجموعة العربية ونضم صوتنا إلى مداخلة مجموعة 77 والصين التي ألقاها مندوب أفغانستان منذ قليل. معالي دولة الرئيس السيدة ميا موتلي رئيسة وزراء بربيدوس، معالي الوزيرة هازبند ممثلة رئاسة المؤتمر في جنيف، معالي الوزراء أصحاب السعادة السفراء، سعادة سفيرة تنزانيا السيدة تاريشي رئيسة المجلس، السيدة غرينسبان السكرتير العام للأنكتاد، السيدة دوران نائبة السكرتير العام للأنكتاد، المندوبون الخبراء، السيدات والسادة الكرام، أسعدتم مساء من جنيف. نهني معالي دولة رئيس الوزراء السيدة ميا موتلي على نجاحكم في احتضان مؤتمر أنكتاد 15 بنجاح والخروج بوثيقة عهد بريدجتاون ووثيقة الإعلان السياسي روح سبايس تاون. كل هذا بالرغم من أنه جاء في وقت جد صعب بسبب جائحة كوفيد-19 وأثرها السلبي على العالم أجمع وبالخصوص على الدول النامية والأقل نمواً. نهنئكم معالي رئيسة الوزراء على الدور الفعال والممتاز الذي لعبته بربيدوس لجمع جميع الدول الأعضاء للأنكتاد وإنجاح التوافق الحكومي المعمول به ضمن منظومة مؤتمر الأمم المتحدة للتجارة والتنمية الأنكتاد، وهذا بفضل حكمتكم وقيادتكم الحكيمة، وذلك بما تقتضيه مصلحة الدول الأعضاء واهتمامات الشعوب وحسب أولويات ومبادئ التنمية المستدامة بعدم ترك أحد بالخلف. الشكر موصول إلى سعادة السفير تشاد بلاكمان والسيدة شاني غريفيث جاك هون في بعثة بربيدوس في جنيف على عملهم التنسيق الممتاز. نهنئ السيدة تاريشي رئيسة المجلس سعادة سفيرة تنزانيا على نجاحها في الانتهاء من صياغة الولاية الجديدة بفضل حكمتها وتوجيهاتها الرشيدة والتنسيق الممتاز للسيدة نيما مانونجي. كما نتقدم بفائق الشكر إلى أصدقاء الرئيس أصحاب السعادة السفراء لبنان، الأرجنتين، بنما وأيرلندا لعملهم المميز خلال المفاوضات والتنسيق بين المجموعات الإقليمية، والشكر موصول إلى جميع المنسقين والخبراء والمندوبين الذين عملوا ليل نهار خلف الكواليس لصياغة الفقرات العديدة وتحملهم هذه المسؤولية الثقيلة خلال السنة ونصف الماضية. المجموعة العربية شاركت في جميع مراحل التحضير لوثيقة التفاوض وجميع الاجتماعات التفاوضية تحت رعاية مجموعة 77 والصين، والشكر هنا موصول إلى سعادة السفير أنديشا سفير أفغانستان منسق مجموعتنا الأم 77 والصين منذ العام الماضي، والتنسيق الممتاز للسيد شعيب تيموري، ومن قبله منسقنا من زامبيا السفيرة مويوتو موا والسيد كاميندا، وقبله منسقنا من الأكوادور السفير أوليستيا والسيدة سيسيليا حين بدأنا أعمالنا قبل 2.5 سنين. الشكر موصول للسيدة غرينسبان لاستلامها مهامها الجديدة لإدارة الأنكتاد ومواصلة تنفيذ الوثيقة المعتمدة. لكم منا الدعم التام سيدتي، دون أن ننسى هنا السيدة إيزابيل دوران نائبة السكرتير العام للأنكتاد ودورها الرئيسي خلال فترة الإغلاق التام. سيدة إيزابيل دوران لم تتوقف خلال 1.5 سنة الماضية إلى وقتنا هذا بتشجيعنا على الاستمرار في الاجتماع والتفاوض على صياغة الوثيقة النهائية قبل بدء أعمال المؤتمر. نشكرها على تشجيعها ووضعها تحت تصرفنا السكرتارية والوسائل التقنية اللازمة مثل الويبكس للاجتماعات العديدة التي عقدت خلال فترة الإغلاق التام هنا في سويسرا وباقي أنحاء العالم بسبب جائحة كوفيد-19. حضورها شخصيا ومشاركتها معنا كان عاملا محفزا وجد إيجابي لتحريك الأمور. الشكر موصول للسكرتاريا ميكائيل وأخوان وإيفيت وريما وجيني من السكرتاريا لصبرهم وتفهمهم خلال المفاوضات والصياغة. في المجموعة العربية نعول على تكاتف الجميع لتحقيق التنمية الشاملة للجميع وتجاوز تنوعنا الثقافي واختلافاتنا السياسية والتركيز على التنمية المستدامة الشاملة، وذلك من خلال تسهيل التجارة لتنمية جميع الاقتصادات والمجتمعات والتصدي إلى التحديات التي نواجهها بسبب تأثير جائحة كوفيد-19 على اقتصاداتنا. طريق التعافي طويل، وخاصة في الدول النامية والأقل نمواً والفقيرة وفي مناطق النزاعات والحروب وفي الأراضي الفلسطينية المحتلة ومناطق الكوارث الطبيعية والصناعية. المجموعة العربية تتطلع إلى أوسق أواصر التعاون والمساعدة التقنية المقدمة من الأنكتاد، ونؤكد على أهمية دور الأنكتاد في المرحلة القادمة لتعزيز الشراكات شمال جنوب وجنوب جنوب. إنما قامت بصياغته الدول من خلال وثيقة الولاية الجديدة للأنكتاد تمثل مبادرة طموحة ورؤية شاملة للواقع الاقتصادي والاجتماعي الصعب الذي يعيشه العالم. لقد وضعتنا جائحة كوفيد-19 أمام مسؤوليات تاريخية تحتم علينا العمل سويا دون تفرقة، ونأمل من خلال مؤتمرنا هذا قد نجحنا في مقاربة هذه الأزمات واجتراح الحلول، وهذا بتضافر كل الجهود في إطار التعاون والتنسيق مع الجميع لتحقيق نتائج إيجابية في كل المجالات المتعلقة بالتجارة والتنمية. ختاماً، نتطلع إلى المرحلة المقبلة لتنفيذ الولاية الجديدة عهد بريدجتاون وتعزيز دور الأنكتاد الرئيسي للتنمية والتجارة ضمن منظومة الأمم المتحدة بفضل الشمولية التي يتميز بها. أشكركم.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I'd like now to invite Ambassador Salama of Malawi on behalf of the least developed countries to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, the chairperson of this session and the conference, Ms. Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, Secretary General of UNCTAD, Ms. Grynspan, Deputy Secretary of UNCTAD, Isabel Durant, my brother, Ambassador Bachman Chad, and Chair of the whole, Ambassador Tarishi, and all those who have taken all their efforts to make this event a memorable event as well. As the 15th session of the United Nations Conference on Trade Development comes to a close, I would like to take this floor on behalf of the group of the least developing countries. The group of LDCs held a ministerial meeting of the least developing countries on 16 September. It adopted a ministerial declaration which provides political guidance and direction to advance trade and developing interests of LDCs in the COVID-19 environment. I would like to recall one point made by the Ministerial Declaration, that it is that pursuit of Doha Program of Action for LDCs in the decade 2022 to 2031 to be adopted during the LDC 5 conference in January 2022 in Qatar. LDCs will need support from the international community for the development of their productive capacities in two main forms. First, a new generation of international support measures, and second, to extend research, analysis, capacity building, and support to policy formulation and implementation. I would like to emphasize now the crucial role that Unctad plays in support of the development of LDCs. During the 50 years since the establishment of the LDC category by the United Nations Assembly in 1971, Unctad has continuously provided backing to LDCs through three main pillars of its work, namely research and analysis, technical cooperation, and building consensus building. The Bridgestone Covenant affirms the commitment of UNCTAD to continue supporting the efforts of LDCs towards sustainable development. Looking towards the coming years, the LDCs group reaffirms its support to UNCTAD and its expectations that the organizations will, one, play a major role in the implementation of the Doha Program of Action. Second, to expand and strengthen the work of research on productive capacities and structural transformation with the policy analysis and the formulation of policy guidelines, frameworks, and recommendations. This policy work should be subject of in-depth policy dialogue between the organization's staff and LDC country officials. 3, perform the systematic evaluation, monitoring and diagnosis of the evolution of the level of productive capacities of LDCs, and do productive capacities gap assessment to provide inputs to domestic and international policy making. 4, to assist LDCs to take full advantage of trade, investment, and official development assistance flows in order to maximize their impact on the development of our countries, and to assist LDCs in the formulation of policies and mechanisms that foster transfer of technology from more developed countries and the building of technological capacities of enterprise in the LDCs, and contribute with the support of member states to make the graduation of our countries from strengthening the analytical and technical work on graduation with momentum and a smooth transition. And lastly, to undertake an in-depth forward-looking policy analysis on a new generation of international support measure to LDCs. In the coming years, the group of LDCs look forward to the cooperation with Unctad in the implementation of both the Bridgestone Covenant and the DOA Program of Action. And lastly, I would want to affirm and align our group to the remarks that have been made by those who spoke before us in thanking Barbados and all those people who have put their efforts to the work that was put to organize this session, to say thank you. Asante sana, Zikomo Kwambiri. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asante sana. I'd like to invite now the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom, Mr. Cook, to take the floor, please.
Thank you, Honourable Prime Minister Motley, Secretary General, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. The United Kingdom would like to congratulate you all, and in particular our gracious host Barbados, for delivering an impactful conference in what have been very challenging circumstances. The fact that the international community was able to meet virtually on this occasion to discuss some of the most pressing economic and developmental challenges of our time and seek consensus on the best way forward is a tribute to the enduring power of multilateralism. We must harness this momentum and this willingness to act to build back better from the pandemic and achieve a more equal, green and prosperous world for all. This drive has been most exemplified by the efforts of all member states to adopt the Bridgestone Covenant. After 9 months of intensive negotiations, we now have a revitalised mandate and a refreshed direction for the organisation, one which acknowledges the importance of building back better from the pandemic, addressing climate change, progressing digital transformation and women's economic empowerment, and having a well-functioning Unktad which truly responds to the needs of developing countries. Barbados should also be commended for bringing to the fore the specific challenges facing small island developing states, as well as the need for collaborative action on climate change. Indeed, we hope that when the world comes together for COP26 in Glasgow in just a few short weeks, it will be a turning point for our world and how we tackle climate change. I wish to extend my appreciation to all regional coordinators, the Secretariat, Chair and Friends of the Chair for their tireless work to make this week's conference and its outcomes possible. In the spirit of collaboration, and as mentioned previously by my colleague from Australia, I'm also pleased to announce that the United Kingdom will, henceforth, be joining the JustCans regional grouping at Unctad. This is a testament to the already close relationships between our countries and to the willingness to work even closer together on this important agenda going forward. We look forward to working closely with the Secretary-General and other members on implementing the new mandate and a revitalised Unctad over the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cook, and thank you for your words. May I ask now Ana Rosario from the Dominican Republic to please take the floor.
Señora Presidenta de la 15ª sección de la Conferencia de las Naciones Unidas para el Comercio y Desarrollo, señora Rebeca Grynspan, Secretaria General de la Uncta, distinguidos representantes de la Conferencia Ministerial UNCTAD 15. En nombre de mi delegación, quiero agradecer a la Presidenta de la 15ª sección de la Conferencia por su liderazgo celebrando esta reunión ministerial en circunstancias sin precedentes. También me gustaría mencionar que estamos satisfechos de que todos los esfuerzos se vean coronados por el éxito y que este evento haya logrado los objetivos previstos. Con reconocimiento a la señora Isabel Durán, a la secretaria de la Uncta, a los Estados miembros y embajadores involucrados, a los coordinadores del GRULAD y del Grupo 77 y China. Nosotros aprovechamos la oportunidad para brindar todo nuestro apoyo a la intervención hecha por el Grupo de Países de América Latina y el Caribe ante las Naciones Unidas, el GRULAD, y Grupo 77 y China. Quiero aprovechar esta oportunidad para reiterar en nombre de la delegación de la República Dominicana el entero apoyo al trabajo de la UNCTAD en la ejecución de su mandato, en la implementación de los objetivos planteados, de manera especial acogiendo con satisfacción la adopción del convenio Bridgestone, confiados en que ofrecerá una nueva orientación, un nuevo relanzamiento con fuerza los trabajos de la UNCTAD en apoyo de los países en desarrollo y que no se quede nadie atrás. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, ma'am. My dear friends, it is now time for us to bring these proceedings to a close. I think we've done well in difficult circumstances to conclude substantive negotiations and to produce meaningful outcome documents, the names of which the people of Barbados will always be proud: the Bridgestone Covenant and the Spirit of Speightstown, the Political Declaration. We, above all, have been able to deliver Secretary General Grynspan and Deputy Secretary General Durand a successful conference from 2 production centers in Barbados and in Geneva on a unique and purpose-designed virtual platform. That is a significant achievement. None of this was easy, and there were many hands behind the scene. I've already asked you to thank, in my earlier statement, Ambassador Marshall, who was the lead coordinator on our part. But I have left her twin for the end. And I would like now to ask you, please, in Barbados and Geneva, to commend Isabel Valentini, who also has been the linchpin behind the successful conclusion of this conference, along with Ambassador Marshall. Isabel, please do not be modest, and please stand up and let us salute you. Your professionalism and your commitment has been evident to everyone, and I just told the DSG that anytime you need somewhere to work, call me.
No, stay with us.
I also want to thank the other members of the teams, because we all know that it is not one person on either side of the Atlantic that made this happen. And I therefore hope that you will commend all of the members of the teams who have, over the course of the last 2 years, brought us to this point successfully. In addition, it would be remiss of me, having told you how proud we are of this virtual platform, for us not to thank our special consultant, Richard Rollins, and the technical production teams in Barbados, of whom we are very, very proud. Mr. Christopher Cook Johnson, Adja, who was in here all morning, but I think we were going on a little too long for him, so send a message to him for me. And also Mervyn Lynch Productions for the assistance as well. I could call everyone's name here, but I'm not going to, but you all know all of you with the camera work and the virtual platforms. Thank you, thank you. You have made our country so proud by the manner in which you have executed your task, and I know that you can be recommended to anyone else globally to continue this work. I also want to thank those persons who have been responsible for our interpretation. We take it for granted, but this is a global conference, and therefore without them, we would not be able to build the consensus that we have. Similarly, as simple as it may seem, we are in a pandemic, and I want to thank you and the young lady for making sure that we remain safe. You see, look at her come in one time, stand up and be counted. Thank you very much, my dear. As well as all of the others who have kept this conference center ticking over. I'm told that people were here from as early as 5:30 this morning. 4 o'clock? Yes. 4:30. So that you understand that this has literally been around the clock production, and therefore all of the people at the Lloyd Erskine Sanford Center, all of the people who are working to make it happen, we thank you. And last but not least, we want to thank the media, local and international media, because we do our work, but at the end of the day, you have to help us communicate it to the rest of the world. So hopefully we can build on what we are doing by having more persons join us in this effort. This has been a special experience for us and for the people of Barbados. For those who wonder why we did it because our voices need to be heard. We did it because we need to create policy space for small island developing states. We did it because we need to create fiscal space for small island developing states. And little did we know when we committed to doing it that we would need to be doing it more than ever because of the confluence of the pandemic and the climate crisis. Thank you very much. As I bring it finally, therefore, to an end, UNCTAD 15, I'd like to invite you to join. I'm not sure what time it will be, but there is one special bookend that I asked Isabel for when we were planning this conference. We had hoped to have had 2 bookends with a live band and music and everything, but such is life. But the other one that was critical for us was the one that will take place in the Flamboyant Auditorium as our final event of this conference. And it's called A Celebration of Spirituality. And it was recorded at the historic Codrington College. And we hope that this event will be a precursor to the making of that space at Codrington College, a special space globally, where persons from different religions and of different spiritual persuasions can come together to learn and to show how we can reflect and work together on this, in this world, in a small space, without the isms and schisms that have otherwise characterized too much of global civilization. And I therefore invite you to come to that space and to listen to how we seek to define a common purpose, just as the SG Guterres reminded us on Monday morning of the need to have a common agenda. My friends, all that is left for me to do is to ask you, please, wherever you are in the world, to keep safe, keep committed, and let us work together to build a better world, doing so anchored now by the Bridgestone Covenant and the spirit of Speightstown. Thank you very much. This conference is now, and closing plenary is now formally closed. Thank you.